Hey guys, I just wanted to let you know that in this conversation, we talk about child neglect and drug abuse. So if you would find either of those topics triggering, I would really encourage you to skip this episode and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you. Hey guys, it's Indy and Jordan here, and this podcast is brought to you by Yes He Is. We get to just chat to some incredible people about their stories of how they're sharing their faith around the world.
Absolutely. It's such a joy. And today's guest on this conversation is exactly that. We have got James Whyte joining us today. James, I'm really excited to dive into your story and then also just talk a little bit about what life looks like for you now and what you're giving your time to, the missions.
Yeah.
James, it's a real joy to have you on this conversation with us today. So thank you so much for joining us. You at the moment are working with Christ for All Nations.
Correct,
you were ordained by Daniel Calendar, but there is such a rich story of transformation, of experiencing God's grace. And so I want to hear, of course, about what you're doing now, but I want to start with your story.
Yeah.
And so talk to us, what is the James Whyte origin story?
So I kind of grew up in a household of like alcoholism. There was a lot of sort of things going on in a household that someone shouldn't be exposed to at a young age, but I kind of see it as a normality. And because of that, sort of the things that I used to look for identity in from being young was like finding it in the streets and going out with the people that I shouldn't have been hanging out with from a young age. And because of that, what happened was I got caught up in the wrong circles. So very early on, I was exposed to drugs and exposed to sort of criminal activity. And I was out there trying to find an identity with the people on the streets that necessarily you shouldn't do, finding a position of family and an orientation of like a unity and a community. And because of that, I ended up selling drugs and getting caught up with drugs really young.
Wow. How old were you?
I was around, when everything sort of started, I think I was around 15, 16 when that stuff used to happen. Wow. Yeah.
And whereabouts were you when all of this was happening?
So I grew up in Plaistow in East London. So yeah, I'm an East Londoner.
Come on.
I started off taking small drugs like cannabis, and then it excelled onto the higher drugs and Class A drugs and selling them kind of things. And sort of with that culture of living comes with all of the negativity, this robbing from people, the stealing and all of that kind of stuff. And then I ended up in the warehouse raves. I'm not sure if you guys know about this. There's like this old format of how things used to happen where people used to call a number at 10 p.m. and they used to arrive to a warehouse that people used to go to, and it would be like an illegal rave that they used to do. And I remember when I first found out about these, it was an environment that I could go to and just do whatever I wanted to do.
Sure.
And before I knew it, I ended up hosting those warehouse raves myself.
Wow.
I always kind of wanted to do as most in that environment of anarchy and be against the system and sort of be rebellious. And it's kind of the culture that I used to live for at those times, yeah.
And when you're in the midst of all of that, what's your framework for what life is all about?
Do you know what, really and truly, I was just living in the moment. I was living for the next experience. I didn't really have so much of an ambition other than to be someone that was clearly sort of disobedient, sort of stands out, put your middle finger up at society kind of attitude. That's the kind of person I was before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But see, I used to take drugs every single day, but no one ever used to know about it because I used to shield it along the environment of like making it like it was a weekend thing. And for many years, no one even knew about it. Wow. Because I was selling drugs and I was going to these environments with drugs, I could kind of shield it because I could blame it on other things. Until it got really bad to the point that selling drugs couldn't be done anymore because I was taking too many drugs. The environments, I couldn't go anymore because of the drugs were taking a toll on me, that I was becoming paranoid and anxious and just not being in a well state of mind. That the drugs ended up being taken so much that I couldn't supply what I was doing and I ended up with nothing. And see, when I ended up with nothing, it got really, really dark because I never had the money to buy the drugs. I never had the drugs to take, and I had this void inside of me that needed to be filled with drugs. So I ended up starting to rob people. And when I robbed someone, eventually it took me on a journey of violence, getting caught up. Sometimes I was going into the streets and just getting caught up in craziness just to try and get myself a pound note to go and buy drugs. But then I ended up robbing the wrong person and I got kidnapped. So when I got kidnapped, I was held in a location for 4 hours and I was beaten with the back of a tomahawk. I was stabbed. I was beaten with knuckle dusters, like to the point of like my head to toe, I was black and blue and I had holes in my legs and everything. And then I eventually got out of that. But see, just before that happened, what happened was I was in my bedroom using the drugs that I actually stole that caused this. And I said, I just would come to a place of desperation. And I said, God, if you're real, I want you to come through that door. And I remember laying on the floor in a place of kind of psychosis, looking underneath the crack of the door, and nothing happened. And like, I knew when I asked that question that God was real. I was asking a question that I already knew the answer to, because there's been so many signs throughout my life. There's been the person sharing their faith on the street, the video on YouTube, the people that come up to you and hand a flyer, the Alpha course that I spontaneously turned up at and spent 3 weeks in and then left. And all of these little nuggets that God comes with all the time when he's planting seeds in your life. So I kind of knew he was real. But when that never happened, when I asked him to come through the door and he didn't, it almost sparked a hatred within me. Like, why are you ignoring me? And what that really done, it didn't just spark a hatred in that moment to God. And even in that moment, there was a hatred to God, but God still used it. It also made me sort of feel like a self-destruction in the world, that everyone was sort of my enemy. And that's what led me down to that path. So just going forward back to the time when I was in that room and I was held hostage, a peace came over me, even though naturally speaking, it looked like everything was going to be ended there.
Sure, yeah.
The peace came over me that everything was going to be all right. And I didn't really understand it. And I probably put it down to sort of the state of mind that I was in at the time. So I got out of there and I remember running to my friend's house. I was running down the street naked and I ran to my friend's house and I got to his door. And as he opened the door, I fell and collapsed because all of the adrenaline dropped and I felt like I was in a bit of safe hands, so I didn't have to fend for myself, and I fell. Wow. And then I woke up in the hospital and I was in resuscitation. I was throwing up blood. And I remember my mum was standing there looking at me, not sure what was going to happen next. And I was in a place of psychosis. So I looked at my mum and I said, "Hey, Mum, don't worry. It was just some juice I drank earlier on." And I was just in a place of delusion at this time. I was kind of spaced out. And I remember waking up a couple of days later in the hospital, and it was the time that COVID was happening. I never understood what COVID was because I was so caught up in the drug world that I wasn't watching the news, I wasn't watching everything. So because of everything that was going on, they gave me a very sharp move because of what happened to West London. When someone goes through a traumatic experience, you kind of get something called PTSD, and that can go two ways. It can mean that you can seclude yourself or you can sort of get delirious. And I genuinely, after that scenario, assumed that I was in a state of mind where nothing bad could happen to me. If something bad was going to happen to me, it was because of that. I was remembering that state of peace I was feeling, and I kind of felt like nothing bad could happen to me, but it sent me down a route that it was going to lead on to destruction. I was literally going into people's houses I didn't know, stealing from them. It got really bad. I was calling family, trying to get money from people. It was really dark. And I remember being in my bedroom, and I remember my hands were completely black from all the drug use that I was taking. My walls were white, but they had black fingerprints all over them where, like, when you're in that state, you're kind of delirious. And I remember there just being a small amount of drugs that was on the side, and my heart was palpitating because I knew that once that ran out, there was nothing that I could do to get more. And I couldn't handle that feeling. That I got down on my knees and I began to weep, like really loudly, and cry out to God. And I said, "God, I can't take this anymore. I surrender." And it was like a real deep heart point where I had enough. And I literally felt a wind come into the room and I felt a state of peace. I curled up with my knees into my chest and fell asleep. And the next day, everything was different. Like, my heart was different, the desires not to use drugs, the desires to just start really seeking God and open up, get a Bible, to read a Bible. And I just didn't want to live the life that I lived. I didn't really understand it at first. At first, I kind of was like, what happened? Like, why do I feel different? And it took me a couple of days, and I just kind of felt like something drop in me. It was like that, like the connection from me crying out and that moment I had in my bedroom, it was sort of like the puzzle piece come together of what happened. And I realized, you know what, God done something to me that night.
Yeah.
I had a radical change in my bedroom that was just a point of a crying out point. The Bible says everyone that calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. And I truly believe that it came to that point where I called on the name. I didn't call for the experience. No. A lot of the time we can come to God for experience, and you can have experiences with God. But unless you truly come to that point of coming to the end of yourself, which I chose to do. I asked for the experience. God come through the door. Didn't work out. But then I come to the point where I said, "God, I need you. Help me." And then that's the moment everything changed. That's kind of the origin story of how I came to the Lord.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you'd even trust us and just be so vulnerable and share your own story. It is interesting though, because as I'm listening to you talk, it doesn't feel like you're talking about yourself. it feels like you're sharing this kind of urban legend about someone else's story. There's such a disconnect.
Kind of the scripture does say that old things become, everything, the old pass away and all things become new. And I kind of feel like that's the process that's happened along this, you know?
Growing up, you obviously, especially for us with similar ages, we grew up being exposed to the reality of just how much drugs can harm someone. But I think sometimes along with that narrative can come a form of judgment, where you can almost make it's us versus them. Oh no, those are the guys that they're doing drugs. They're going to use the money towards drugs. But I remember I once heard this quote, and it said that proximity creates passion, distance creates distortion. It's such a distorted reality.
Yeah.
But since you've been in that world, how has it helped you in your compassion, especially when you share your faith, for people that are still very much in that world?
Yeah. Do you know what? A lot of the time, and this is my personal understanding, a lot of the time we can almost bring separation from, let's say, the businessman in the penthouse office that makes millions of pounds and is focused on their next pound note, their next £1 million, focused on their next business deal.
Yeah.
From the person you see sitting on the street corner, begging for the next coin to get the next drug. And really and truly, when you look at it, all it is the flesh in a different format. And like, it's almost our human understanding that we separate those two things. So really and truly, the same sort of issue that is within mankind is in play to the drug addict, to the person that is running up after the next pound note. That's the next person that has a cigarette problem. The next person has an alcohol problem. The next person that fixates on going on to holidays and feels empty unless they have that next holiday experience. It only looks better on the eye because they're experiencing something that mainly someone else wants to experience. It's only because how dark drug addiction looks that we actually separate it. And I feel like no matter where a human being is placed and sort of whatever they're exposed to and whatever lifestyle choices that they have, without Jesus as the forefront, they're all going to go through that same experience of trying to fill themselves with something that void inside of them is never really going to be filled with, that they're going to have to keep chasing. Like, it's almost like a hamster wheel. So if I'm honest with you, I kind of feel that there is a level of extremity that someone that goes through addiction goes through with the flesh. But really it's just the same sort of fleshly desires of fulfillment, satisfaction that you're chasing.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's really cool to hear it, honestly. It's so powerful. And I just think like that moment with Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, also the moment of disappointment, not seeing Jesus' feet and that crack of the door.
Yeah.
Like to then meeting Jesus.
Yeah.
How did that feel? Like, what was that like?
So,
Talk about that experience.
It took me a couple of months. Like I did spend a lot of time meditating on why it happened like that, what caused that. And sort of the understanding I got from the whole time is that it's not that God ignored me. It's that it's what my intention was of that moment. I was still caught up in that desire for experience. It was almost like an experience thrill that I was trying to fulfill. And even when I looked underneath the crack of the door and I said, God, come through the door, it wasn't like I really wanted to surrender to God. I just wanted another experience.
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought he ignored me, but really he was just trying to get my heart postured correctly for what he wanted to do. That was not, because I say this and I say it again. Charles Spurgeon had this powerful statement, and it says, the beginning of Christ is the end of self. In that moment, I just wanted an experience.
Yeah.
But it was only when I come to the end of myself that God was like, okay, now you're ready.
Very good.
Because if now he will come with the experience, he will come with that revelation of sonship. He will like go on this journey with me of walking with God.
Yeah.
But it was only when the intention was to be a son and be surrendered to God and make that decision to follow Jesus that everything can come into line together. So it wasn't that he was choosing not to. It's just my heart needed to be postured right. So when I look at that experience again, like I said, the day after, it was almost like I forgot what happened.
Yeah.
Everything manifested, the desire to stop using drugs, the decision to walk in a different way, the desire to pick up the word, the desire to really see God was there. But the remembrance of what I did the night before was almost like it wasn't important, it wasn't remembered. And I was like, why do I feel different? Like what's changed? I've tried so many different things to try and change before. And it was like a few days later, I was like, you know what? I actually surrendered my heart to God. That's what it was. And it was grace. It wasn't me. It wasn't like me trying to stop anything. It wasn't like me trying to fix myself. It wasn't me trying to deal with the demons that I was walking with of using drugs. It was like, right, I surrender and then grace steps in.
Sheesh. Wow.
I truly believe that anyone that's gone on a journey like I've gone on, all it takes is, like Charles Spurgeon says, it says, in order to come to the beginning of Christ, you must come to the end of yourself. And it has to be about nothing else about what you can get. It can't be about what the blessings of God is. It can't be about, I want this in exchange for this, like a conditional thing. It has to be like, I come to the end of myself, God, I want you. And I truly believe that that's on offer for everyone, because all it takes is that posture, that heart's point of, I've had enough, and then surrendering to God.
Wow.
So that's kind of the experience that I had.
When you think about God's timing
Yeah.
with your story,
Uh-huh.
was there a journey you had to go on to kind of reconcile with his timing, or was there frustrations of, why then?
Do you know, if I'm honest with you, there was a journey. There was a lot of me trying to fix myself. There was a lot of mental health issues. There was a lot of being admitted to mental health hospitals. There was a lot of drugs meetings, drugs programs, rehabilitation programs, and nothing worked because I was trying to do it in my own ability.
Wow.
I might go a couple of weeks and then I was just, but the character was the same. The attitude was the same. Like there was no heart change.
Yes.
And I kind of feel like the timing that God chose, there wasn't frustration because it was in that moment, it was like I found what I was looking for and nothing else really mattered. It wasn't about how long it took to get there. It wasn't about any of that. It was about I found what I was looking for and I'm glad that I'm here now.
Yeah.
And it's just that sense of gratitude. But I feel like in the timeline, I would say the reason why God chose the time that he chose is because I had to really die. I had to really try and do it all in my own ability in order to be in a place that I know that even now, as I wake up every day, and the first thing I do when I wake up is just show gratitude to God. Because I remember times that the first thing I wanted to do when I woke up was find out how I'm going to get my next drug so I could feel that satisfaction just for a temporary moment. And now it's kind of like, I know that I can't live my life in a moment without God, because I know that without God, without grace covering me, without what my faith in what Jesus done, then I wouldn't be even in this seat here today. So I kind of feel like that's why he chose that time and he permitted all of that stuff to happen, because it's molded my faith today in knowing I can't do it by myself. Yeah.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Man, I'm so moved by your story.
Yeah.
I think a big part of even just being transformed by Jesus is sometimes after that transformation, there can be an element of shame or guilt attached to your previous life, your old life that's now gone.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be the very thing that can disempower you from the mission, the beautiful invitation that you have.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to that? The people that feel disempowered by the life that they used to live?
Do you know what? There was a 7-month period after I got saved where everyone thought I was having a psychotic episode.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, just like Jesus, when he went back to Galilee, I believe it was, and he was not accepted by anyone there because he was like, ain't you Mary's son? And I kind of felt like when I started to go back to my area and I had this newfound faith, everyone was kind of be like, but you're just selling drugs, taking drugs. Like, what do you have to say? But God separated from me from where I was for a couple of years.
Wow.
And then I came back. And a lot of the people that I used to run with before now look at me and like, what happened to you?
Sheesh.
So when it comes to all of that shame stuff and all of that kind of stuff, if I'm honest with you, God has really put me into a place that I wear my badges of honor with pride, because I'm I can't be shameful and in that place of shame about someone that I'm not anymore.
Yeah.
It's not
Amazing.
me. I'm
Amazing.
a completely different person.
Yeah.
I was once a person that I would literally be the person that you cannot trust through anything. And now I'm a person that a lot of the time people can confide in and trust and rely on. So when it comes to the shame, there was a period when people were misjudging me at the beginning, but I know people that I used to sell drugs with that have got saved because of what's happened. I had someone a couple of months ago reach out to me because they saw a video they were scrolling through their reels and they come across a reel of me preaching supernaturally, because they haven't even got me on social media. They stopped. They was like, wait, that's James. And then afterwards they've messaged me straight away and I spoke to them and they ended up getting saved because of them seeing that transformation. Because I was that person that would amount to nothing. That's that. he's not going to make it past 30. He's not going to get anywhere. He's that kind of person. Stay away from James. Even from a young age, I was that person that, like, you know, that person in school that would have been seen by the teachers as the one that's probably going to amount to nothing. I was that person.
Well,
And the reason why that was is because I didn't really have identity. I was misplaced. I didn't know where I was. But really, when I found my real identity as a son of the Most High God because of what Jesus Christ done, that's when the game changed. That it wasn't like I had to prove myself anymore because I was already approved, you know? So I kind of felt that shame stuff. That shame stuff went out the window quite quickly because I had that genuine know in me that I was different.
Beautiful, man.
You know?
And so we've just touched on this beautiful story of transformation. But then a big part of your story now, of course, is mission.
Yeah.
You know, you given your life to be able to helping others experience the freedom and healing that you've experienced.
Yeah.
How do we get there?
If I put myself back in that moment to where I am now, I didn't really sign up for that, but God had a different idea.
Sure,
and it's the best choice that I've ever had and best thing that God has ever done taking me upon this journey. But I just love that because oftentimes, and I just want to say this, when we come to Jesus in any format that we do, we all get enrolled into this thing in one form or another to continue the ministry that was handed down over the generations, all from the moment that the ascension happened with Jesus. And sometimes we may not know that until the journey goes along and it unfolds to us. So I remember it was at beginning in a lockdown. There was a period of about 4 months that we couldn't go out, if everyone remembers that. And if I'm honest with you, I know that was a bad experience and a lot of people went through a lot of stuff during that time. But for me personally, it was probably the most refining, blessed time of my entire life. Because there was just a meeting place with me and God for 4 months. Like it was like I was in my own Bethel just for a period of time. Where it was just me, my Bible, YouTube, prayer and fasting. And it was like, I went from one extremity all the way to another extremity where it was like, I want to know him for myself. I don't want to just hear about someone talking about him. I want to know him for myself because I know that I encountered him and I wanted to seek him out. So I went through this period and I remember the Lord really speaking to me about so much stuff I didn't understand at the time. I remember I had this it's a very vivid dream that I wasn't really asleep. I was just in a state of just devotion to the Lord. And I was in this big meeting and I was on the stage and I was preaching in this sort of big tent revival setting. And at these times, I didn't understand what tent revivals, crusades, meetings. I didn't get it all of that. I was very new to all of this.
Yeah.
And I remember being there and I was with a mentor, but I didn't see the mentor. It was like I was just aware that I was with a mentor. And this happened a couple of times. And I kind of put it on the shelf. Like, that's great. I had this vivid dream that it seemed like it was awake and that seemed like I was awake, but wasn't really awake. And I thought, okay, cool. I didn't really speak to it about too many people because I just come out of a very state of that people would call mental health. And I didn't want to start telling people about these experiences.
Crazy dreams.
Just in case they thought I was going a bit more crazy. Sure. And I'm not going to lie, when I first come into the faith, a lot of the experiences kind of was like, whoa, this is quite intense, how everything was happening.
Yeah.
And I kind of put it on the shelf, as I said. And then I kind of just went out 4 months, started preaching on the street, sharing my testimony. And then I just kept coming across pastors and leadership. And they kind of was like really amazed how the transformation, and there was invitations to happen into churches within 4 or 5 months of being in the faith. And then there was opportunities to go on shows and podcasts and stuff very early on because of our testimony. And as I kept going, I kind of never really knew where I was called. I was just flowing. I didn't really, I just was just being what I felt I needed to be. And I just wanted a real passion for sharing about Jesus, a real passion for it. And then this opportunity came along that I was invited to go to a boot camp in Orlando, which was just gone. It started in March. And it was to be trained by Christ for All Nations. And Christ for All Nations was founded by someone called Reinhard Bonnke. And this was about 50 years ago, where he had a vision of a blood-washed Africa, that he saw the whole of Africa washed in the blood of Jesus. And this was a man who never even had any ministry in Africa. Yeah. And he even did his first meeting in Africa that 10 people showed up to. And he was just hungry. He kept going. And before you know it, 100 people turn up, then 1,000 people turn up, then 10,000 people turn up, then 30,000 people turn up. Then he had a tent. Then the tent got blown down. And then he started doing open air meetings to the point that like there was even one meeting, he had 600,000 people at a meeting in Africa. And to this date now, there has been 94 million decisions for Jesus Christ saved by the ministry as a whole.
Wow.
And I had an opportunity to go to Orlando for 4 months and be trained in a boot camp, which was intensive 4-month training with hardly any sleep. And then we got sent out to Africa. And in Africa, in 3 weeks, we saw 120,000 decisions for Jesus Christ. And then we came back to Orlando. I graduated and was ordained by Daniel Calenda. And then I went out to Mexico, where I did my own gospel campaign with just 1 week promotion. We saw 500 people turn up. And in that 2 weeks visit that we did, we saw 278 decisions for Jesus Christ. Now, I put that vision on the shelf and I didn't understand what it meant at the time. But now I've been trained by a ministry that's taught me how to do exactly what that vision was.
Yeah.
So we've been taught how to do these campaigns that we can do all over the world. And all it takes is a very small team. So now in London that I've come back, my heart is to connect with churches. I've been back maybe in London, I'd say about 3 weeks now. We've connected already with 5 different churches that we're going to be training up how to do one-to-one evangelism. But also what we do is we go into churches and we offer them an opportunity to learn how to do these meetings that I did in Mexico with the community. And it's a community event. So what we do is we reach out to a borough's community and we literally send out teams where there's teams going all around the different houses. And we let all of the houses know about this community event that we're doing where there's free food, free drinks, gift cards, toys. We're doing one in a couple of weeks where we're going to give away free school supplies for people going back to school.
No way.
But we use that as the hook. One wise man told me, in order to catch a fish, you need to have bait. So what we like to do is we like to use them situations where we're giving to the community to get people to one location and then we preach the gospel to them. That's kind of what I'm doing all over London. We're moving around doing these mini gospel campaigns, inviting the community. Between 200 to 500 people turn up. We preach the gospel to them and then we connect them to the local church that we're doing the meetings with.
When you preach the gospel to a bunch of people who've rocked up thinking they're getting school supplies.
Yeah.
That's pretty audacious.
Yeah.
Like, that's bold.
Yeah.
Are you nervous? What do you like? How do you go about doing that?
We have a day of fun with them. So they come, we do tug of war, we do assault courses where you got to do hula hoops and you got to carry the egg on the spoon. We do all the fun stuff. We give away free burgers, popcorn, free drinks, and we do a real fun day with them. So it's not like they get there and be like, plot twist, you're here to hear the gospel. And what we do is over a course of maybe 2 hours, we build rapport with the community. So over a course of time, there's a lot of music, games, fun that's played. So we build up rapport. And then we don't just hammer them straight away with the gospel. We share a story. And there's like maybe 3 or 4 different stories that we share. A story about a boy with a little boat who loved creating things so much that he created a little boat. And he took it down to the river to see if the boat could float. But all of a sudden, a wind came and separated the boy from the boat. And he was so sad. But then he walked into the streets and saw that his boat was in a shop window and the shopkeeper had to ask him to buy the boat back. So he went and he worked hard to buy the boat back. And eventually he bought the boat back and he walked outside of the shop and held it up in the air and said, little boat, twice you were mine. Once I made you and now I bought you back.
Wow.
So that's a gospel message. And then we say, guys, would you like to know what this story is about? And then we share the gospel about the story, but we link the story and together. So it doesn't become like a really intense religious moment. They're just getting a parable, just like Jesus shared.
Wow.
It's their story, isn't it?
Yeah. And by the end of it, people want to have friendship with God because they can relate to the story of the separation. They can relate to the childlike atmosphere to the story that when we ask people if they want to turn away from their life and have friendship with God, because that was the purpose that we was all created for, people really just, the Holy Spirit works through that moment because they're engaged. A rapport's been built. They have suspense from the story that when you come with the gospel, it's almost like their soul has just received something that they want. So they've already been blessed by the Lord with the blessings, and then they're blessed with the gospel. So every meeting that we have, the spearhead is always the gospel.
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose of what we're bringing. But we also want to bring the love of God, the community and everything together. So by the time that they're connected with a local church, they've already experienced what church is already about, already about.
Amazing.
You know?
Wow. So that's it. It's just building the church around people, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess you say rapport. It's like trust, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really just like, hey, you can trust us.
Yeah.
And that's really that whole moment of blessing someone.
Yeah.
But without having to ask anything in return.
Yeah.
It's just like, we're going to bless you.
Yeah.
But also there is something that we have that is going to bless you even more than you could ever imagine. And so, yeah, that's a really beautiful way of, I guess, ensuring that they're not left without hearing the truth.
Yeah.
And often, I guess sometimes I get nervous about sharing the truth. And I kind of just want to, there's something so beautiful about, blessing someone without having any I guess, expectation of them needing to believe what I believe, or there's that. But then also there's such a bravery and, no, we're going to bless you, but I need to tell you this. Yeah. There's an urgency to that. And I would probably just be nervous and be like, oh, just take the bag and go, like give you a sticker that says Jesus loves you, but I won't share the gospel because that feels like, oh, I don't want you to come here and feel like there was a hidden agenda. Yeah. But how do you navigate that? Have you had conversations around that with people?
So one thing that we like to do during the story is we like to make it interactive. So like, I'd say something like, today we come here to talk, because we focus, the wisdom on what we like to do is we focus on the younger community and the youth, because we know if we can get to youth there, the parents are going to be present. So that's a way that we get everyone to be there. And in the beginning, we even like to build funny moments. Like I'd say something like, hey guys, we've come here today to talk about making the right choices, making the right, and then you make them interact and say choices.
Very good, yeah.
And when the boy loses his boat, what we do is we like, he loses his boat and he was very sad. Cry with me, guys. And then they start crying with you and find it funny. So by the time you come to the gospel message, everyone wants to know what the story's about.
Sure.
And we do see from these events about a 25% conversion rate, where people have 25% of those that are in attendance make a decision for Jesus, because they've not just experienced the message, they've experienced community, love, and people that are genuinely there for them, that haven't got any agenda. They're not trying to get anything from them. It's not about money. It's not about anything other than sharing the gospel with them. And when we do our events, we don't do them to a little level. We get a stage. We put crowd barriers. We make it like a mini festival. Everyone that makes a decision, we have wristbands that we give to them. And we're like, hey, so every event we do is on a Saturday. So we give a wristband, say, hey, if you come to church tomorrow with this wristband, there'll be a small gift waiting for you. You might get just a little Lego box or something, but we'll plan a welcome family message. So everyone that comes in attendance, they'll be told about, you made a great decision. I'm just briefing. You made a great decision for chooses Jesus, but we want to let you know that there's a family here that love you very much. And you don't have to experience life by yourself anymore. You don't have to go through stuff by yourself. We're here to do life with you. And because of that, it takes that stigma away from the religious church. You know, when people look at a church building and they've never been in church and they get intimidated because it's religion, that almost snaps that straight out of reality, because of once you got in the church and they really feel that love of God in that moment, it's easier to add people to the church without having to create a really intimidating bridge to the church building. So that's kind of the goal. It's not just about making decisions. It's about actually getting people into the community of church and being made into disciples more than just decisions.
Wow. One of the things you touched on right at the start of this conversation was the family that you grew up in.
Yeah.
How has God stepped in as a father for you?
I have a son now, and it's one of the, my son's 10. Wow. He's a big 10-year-old. He's probably up to my shoulder. I'm sure he's going to be bigger than me at some point. And a lot of the revelation of God's love has been given through my relationship with my son, seeing it on that side of the fence. Wow. Even through the whole of my family, everyone's been sort of been brought together through my salvation. And a lot of them are really questioning the decision on Christ, or whether they should choose Christ because of my story. Wow. Because as I said, a lot of them thought I was crazy. And now a lot of them are seeing like, hold on, something's happening here.
Yeah.
So when it comes to sort of, I never really had a true deep understanding of like a present father, because I saw my father maybe every 3 months. But one thing that he really has gave me understanding of what a father is through the relationship with him, because it really distorted things at the beginning. And there was a lot of misconceived ideas even of God when I first got saved, because of the only thing that I could relate to was my relationship with God.
Your own experience.
And it began in a place of religion, thinking it was merited based. Even though that there was a grace period, that God graced everything regardless of what I was thinking up here. And like he was present even the times that I thought like, all right, I had to do this to get this. Because that's kind of the understanding that I had. Yeah. It's about, I get to walk with him even as I was coming here today.
Beautiful.
You know, like I can just be present with God without even a conversation being had.
That's beautiful.
Super grateful for just how much you've shared with us today and how you've given us such a big window into such a big story. What do you say to someone if you meet them and they are living the very life that you were once living? What would be your approach for sharing Jesus with them?
I'd say to a person that was going through the same stuff is that you can try and do everything in your own ability. You can listen to the doctors. You can try the medication. You can try the 12 months rehabilitation. You can try the 12-step meetings. You can do all of that kind of stuff. But see, one thing that I've known through being discipled by Jesus and also God bringing people into my life that I have the opportunity to pour into, there's never been a decision made by a human being to say something to them in their own ability that's changed anyone.
Wow.
See, the only thing that we can really do in the position that we've been given in the ministry of reconciliation for other people to be reconciled with God is that we can point them to Jesus.
Wow.
All it would be is, do you want to receive Jesus and come to the end of yourself?
Yeah.
Because really that's what the gospel is. It's we repent, we turn away, and we come to Jesus. So really and truly, the only thing that we can really offer anyone is Jesus. And he does the work. We're just like a roadmap that what we're called to do in the ministry of reconciliation is just do that. And Jesus is over there. And we just have to be that direction pointer to Jesus. And if we just realize that, it says the gospel is the power of God onto salvation. That doesn't mean any individual is powerful. It doesn't mean the way that you preach in a wise way is powerful. Because of the gospel is what's the power of God onto salvation. And it's when we point people to Jesus with the gospel, that's what saves. So very simply, no matter how it feels, no matter what you feel like, just preach the gospel, point them to Jesus, and then God does the rest.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Preach the gospel, point them to Jesus, and God will do the rest.
Yeah.
What a beautiful way to bring this conversation to a close. What a joy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
Thank you so
been
much for
an
sharing
honor.
your story.
Thank you for having me on here.
Yeah, thank you, James. And if any of this has spoken to you guys, thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your stories and what this has kind of brought to mind in your own life. So please let us know in the comments or pop a DM on Instagram. But yeah, thank you for listening. We'll see you for the next episode.